Are you crazy? We've got a big episode for you today. We're going to be talking about 3 topics as usual. First one is war against women. Seems to be a crazy war going on there across the Western world in terms of LGBTQ and gender identity. We've got some information about the COVID vaccine situation. Very careful about what we say on the show now because we don't want to be canceled. We don't want to be kind of struck with a red flag. But we got some really important content that you need to see regarding that. We've also got an update on the Davos WEF23. That's the World Economic Forum meeting that's happening right now in Davos. So much stuff to be going through today. Let's start with the noteworthy news items, and you guys can jump in on this anytime you want because some of these need to be discussed. We've got, first of all, I wanted to go through something that I think is really interesting because in the United States, there have been some serious issues with air travel recently. I don't know if you guys have been up to date with that, but the FAA mentioned that their system, Notice to Air Missions, NOTAM, failed for the first time ever on January the 10th. And then on top of that, the next day, we had Canada's air system failing as well, which is really strange coincidence, right? You would think that they're not connected, and apparently they're not. I don't know if you guys know if they are or not, but for those 2 systems to go down one day after the other is kind of suspicious to me. So I don't really know what's going on. But since then, and again, we can circle back and discuss this a little bit, but since then, we've had Southwest Airlines canceling, flights across the country, across the United States, 2,000 flights apparently, which has led to all kinds of chaos and disruption. So what is really going on here? And there doesn't seem to be a clear-cut answer online anywhere. The mainstream news outlets that are covering it are simply saying that, these problems happen and that they're kind of commenting on the situation, but they're not giving a reason why they happened. And then you've got the actual person in charge of aviation and transport, which is Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg, right? And he doesn't seem to have any reasons either. He says, "Look, these things can happen sometimes." So I don't know what you think about that, but that is a really suspicious situation, and it also seems to somehow coincide with all of the requests for us to cut our carbon emissions and not travel as much, not be as independent as much, stay where you are. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, even though they're flying to jumbo jets to Davos to talk about it, some of it is very hypocritical and is kind of silly in hindsight. With the airlines and the FAA, I have kind of a theory. Again, this is not based in fact. This is just based off of observation in the last few years and some of the ways that the government has tried to influence, I think, the economy. They've done stuff like this before with the supply chain, where it almost felt like they were orchestrating a lot of different ways to either increase or suppress prices, to mess with demands, to create some kind of need almost for certain products and services. And, I feel like with the airline industry and the way it's been very busy and jam-packed and some of the issues they had in the fall with not being able to get people from place to place because of the winter storms that were going on, or not being able to get people on connecting flights. There might be some correlation there potentially where maybe something's being done on purpose, because the FAA doesn't just go down as well as, in Canada or any other correlated countries. So it could be something that's orchestrated. It could be something that's planned. It could be something political as well. It could have something to do with fuel emissions with jets or airlines, but it's hard to say because there's nothing really substantial evidence-wise that's come out. I think all we can do is speculate, and maybe it is nothing, but it is weird, right?
They are saying that there was, what was it, like a computer issue. Some are saying, oh, it's not a cyber attack, but when the government tells you it's not a cyber attack, it's probably a cyber attack. It could also be a diversion, the whole classified documents, that they found in President Biden's garage. So it could be one of many things. And that's the issue here, is that they're throwing so many things at us. Like, the whole circus is so much bigger now. That's keeping us distracted from the real issues. And there are many, many real issues for us to discuss. I mean, even the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, he's too busy talking about racist bridges and tunnels. He's talking about how, yeah. So you didn't see that clip where he's like, if there was a tunnel and a bus wanted to go or a bridge and a bus wanted to go under it, and let's say this bus was carrying brown children, it wouldn't be able to pass because it was too low, and therefore the bus will now no longer take that route. And I was watching this clip and I'm like, this has got to be a joke, right? But he's serious, and he's so glib about the real issues when he's asked. Like, even the whole the grounding of all these airplanes, he really didn't. He basically deflected, and he was always gone from office, from his, place of where he should be tackling these issues. Every single time something major had happened, the supply chain crisis, when all the boats, the ships could not bring stuff in, where was he? He was on parental leave. He's busy tending to his children, and he was on vacation. So there's a huge lack of accountability and responsibility on his part. What amazes me, but really shouldn't, is the fact that Americans are not angry enough to call for accountability on his part. So to me, that's strange. We're all affected by this, but no one seems to really be doing anything.
Yeah, I think we're all severely overwhelmed by the massive psychological warfare that's been going on in the media and what's been coming out of the government spokespeople. It's just such a distraction, and they're really good at it. And it's frustrating because when you wake up, like, this whole podcast is about controversial topics that we recognize, not many people maybe understand. It's frustrating because it's right there in front of your face, and that what the mainstream media is reporting on isn't, true most of the time. I had an argument, not really an argument, but I guess I had a run-in with someone on a social media Well, my pastime now, outside of photography, is I like to go to social media posts from the NPR, CNN, BBC News, The Guardian, whatever, right? All of the left-wing media outlets, and I've put them all on alerts, so I get the notification when they've made a post. And if the post is something that I think I know something about, I'll comment on it straight away. And I usually comment things, that will rile people up. And I get a lot of people leaving me some terrible comments on there, but it's quite funny because all I'm trying to do really is just, at the same time as make people maybe aware, wake them up a little bit to the fact that this is just ridiculous reporting, is also just have a bit of a laugh too. I mean, you gotta have a bit of a sense of humor about these things too.
Mm-hmm. Getting into social media fisticuffs, are you?
What's fun is to set up an anonymous account and then just go in and completely troll people and trigger people for no reason. You got to have fun with it at some point. I think that's the biggest issue, is there's no light and levity to what they're talking about. It's like it's their way or the highway, and everything else is bad. Why can't we talk about a topic that's, objectively controversial and tear down walls and build bridges through laughing and through comedy and, normalizing something in the right way? That's a huge issue. That's what's going on today, and something that the left does that is, inherently wrong, I think.
There's a satire,
humor.
A parody. Sorry, go ahead. No, there's a parody account on Twitter. Her name is Anne Lesby, PhD, and she's got pronouns, because if you read it backwards, Anne Lesby, Anne lesbian, right? Do you follow her? She's hilarious.
Yes.
And she posts all these things like I shouldn't use gas stoves because it depends, my trans children's future depends on it. And it's hilarious because you can tell who doesn't get it and who haven't really been awakened yet, because they're the angriest ones responding to her tweets. and they're like, "Where have you been? You must be new here." And they're so mad, and they're like pointing out facts and like tweeting her with links to certain information, and it's just hilarious. People who miss the joke, they're funny.
These accounts, these parody accounts, they're again, it's really just having fun with the whole thing. That you know what's really going on, and most people don't, and you're having fun at it, kind of seeing the backlash from people who are still asleep. And I follow that person. I follow Libs at TikTok too. Libs at TikTok have kind of grown into. I don't want to kind of go off topic too much, but they've grown into this really big outlet now, and they do a lot of reporting on some serious reporting too. So, there's a vertical for Anne Lesby if she wants it.
Yeah. I mean, even Gays
speaking of-
Against Groomers has grown so much.
I don't follow that one, but there's so many of them. But speaking of humor, you, Hillary, brought my attention, or our attention, to a new form of treatment that the Hollywood elite are enjoying right now. What the hell is penis treatment?
I've
got a picture here.
Yeah, go ahead and share it. I honestly, I was thinking to myself, this has gotta be a joke, right? But apparently it is exactly what it sounds like. So Sandra Bullock and I believe
Sandra
Kate
Bullock,
Blanchett. Yeah, and Kate I just caught that. And Kate Blanchett have been getting this done. They get this specific facial. It's called the Hollywood EGF facial treatment. And what it is they get the stem cells from the foreskin of newborn Korean babies. It's got to be Korean because they have the
Korean.
Skin.
Why
Because
Korean?
They have that porcelain glass skin, Asian skin. We
Oh, well,
true.
Clement knows. He's half Asian, right?
The Asian foreskins do hit differently.
That's not what I meant. And I do not get these facials, but it is just, I mean, where do you draw the line? They could always say, well, it's just stem cells. It's not like we get the actual skin and rub it on our face. But still, the fact that they harvest these foreskins from Korean newborn babies, I mean, that's a process. That's a process that's well thought out, and it doesn't fall too far from being linked to the whole, pedophilia trend, or can you even call it that, lifestyle of the Hollywood elite. So it's not as alarming as, for example, the artwork in Jamie Lee Curtis's living room, or the Balenciaga scandal, but it's up that alley, don't you think? The fact that there's just this whole obsession with tapping into children as though they were a nutrient source. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that to me, where do we draw the line, I guess, is the big question.
This is so weird. I have so many questions about this too. Like, are they farming the babies? Like, do they have a supply chain for the baby foreskin? Does this go to a lab in a bag and it's labeled Korean baby foreskin? And then I don't know, are they injecting it or what are they doing with the stem cells? Like, do you know?
So they do what there's this process called micro needling, which is not new to older women. You've heard of it, right? Where they poke holes in the skin to kind of stimulate the fibroblasts to create more, I guess, collagen, if they even can. So they get these stem cells. There are plant stem cells that, for example, I use a product that uses plant stem cells to help, keep my skin moisturized or try to fight aging, which I'm obviously losing that battle. But still, like, for them, they're getting these stem cells from the foreskin of the babies and putting that into whatever solution they are using with the micro needling. So as they inject that in their faces, that's what causes their skin to be more plump, to appear more radiant, to be more elastic, and what's the word? Taut. Potato.
Tout.
So tout. They're touting their tout skin. So yeah, I mean, micro needling in itself is already effective, but I guess they want to go the whole 9 yards and get that foreskin stem cell in.
Oh gosh, I feel so bad for them. Like, they're gonna get made fun of now. How you doing, penis face? Like, they're walking through public if this stuff really goes viral.
I'll never forget.
Oh god.
Yeah, I mean, it was something controversial to kind of to say in public that I get this treatment and it's forced kids. I mean, that's a step in itself. But the whole
Mhm.
topic of it being babies' penises is just really sick. I don't think these people have any grip on reality. You know, the Hollywood. I used to absolutely adore a lot of actors and people in Hollywood because I put them on a pedestal, and you know, it's because the work that they do is amazing, right? It pushes all of your emotional switches, and you feel, and then you end up feeling for them in a certain way. You put them on a pedestal, and you respect them. But with everything that has been coming out lately, and what I've learned about Hollywood and all its dark secrets and its connections to the political elite and the governing elite, really has put in question my faith in everything I watch on television and in the
Mhm.
movies. You know, I'll watch it now with a very different eye. I'm very curious now as to what the messaging is supposed to be and why. And I think Disney is kind of unraveling a lot because they're really pushing hard for certain things like LGBTQ and just gender non-binary kind of narratives, right? So it's just really strange. And then again, coming back to the whole Hollywood thing, we got this story that's just come out about Beyonce's drummer of 7 years claiming that Beyonce is a satanic witch who has been performing witchcraft and has been stalking her, tapping her phone, even killed her kitten, apparently, and destroyed many of her relationships. And I think, you know, I don't really know what's going on. I don't think anyone does. I don't think anything's going to come from this either because Beyonce is such a big star. So I don't think she's touchable in this way. But isn't it weird that you just have all of these strange satanic related um, news, and somehow it's tied to the same group of people every single time? I don't know what's going on. Again, I hear Alex Jones talk about it. I hear less controversial people talk about it. And then you see videos. I got some images here, right? Just to kind of like go in line with what's being talked about here. Beyonce's ex-drama has accused her of using witchcraft to murder a pet kitten. But then you've got things that kind of make you question, well, is there something to this, right? Um, we got this weird symbolism going all around Hollywood at the moment. It's been going on for decades, but we're only just noticing it, I think. And, you know, I saw this kind of collage of stars the other day, and there's something to do with the eye, right? You cover the eye. It's a symbol of
Mhm.
unity with the Masonic kind of Illuminati secret groups of people. And I don't question for a moment that kind of stuff exists. I think the real interesting thing for me is how far does it reach, and will it ever be kind of officially revealed? That's what I'm wondering.
Some of these circles are really tight. I mean, you know, Jay-Z and Beyonce are actually very close to the Clinton family.
Mm.
They actually did a lot of support for her when she was running for president, just not that long ago against Trump. So I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know. I feel like, again, it's like they're trying to subliminally normalize it for people by putting it in, you know, whether it's music or videos or advertising, or like just sneaking it into society like it's not that big of a deal. Even on Netflix. On Netflix, you see all kinds of you know, series being created now where they're injecting satanic content into it, whether it's about satanic content or it's like a sub uh, role in the show or in the movie. Like it's like all over society, especially in music, which is like the craziest thing. So I'm not necessarily surprised to see it. I think there's a lot more to it, but I think more and more is going to get revealed as we go on with this because I think people are craving an answer, especially after everything that's happened with like Balenciaga. So um,
Mhm.
I expect to see more of it, honestly.
Yeah, I think, you know, just to your point about Netflix, and this is again touching on the fact that I recently woke up to what Hollywood really seems to be. Netflix is actually the CEO is one of the, I think the cousin, or anyways, a family member, is a direct descendant of the guy Bernays who created propaganda. responsible for propaganda and what it is today, right? And so you can kind of see how all of these things are so closely linked. The lineage goes back. It's really important, I think, to if you're listening or watching this and you're like, nah, I don't know about that. You know, how could it be so well orchestrated and planned? I think it's important to just keep your mind open to the possibility that what you're watching on the screen has a secondary objective too, well, not only to entertain you, but to influence the way that you think. And so, yeah. But
You know that
to know what you want to say.
go ahead. Yeah, no, it just reminds me of you know, Foo Fighters, the band, right? Dave Grohl. There was this whole, I don't know if you remember this or if you came across this, there was this whole hubbub about how Dave Grohl is actually, he confessed to being a Satanist. And his drummer, Taylor Hawkins, had passed away just a month after their album Satanic, what's it called? Satanic Sacrifice, I think was the title of the album. And so a lot of speculation has come out that his drummer was actually the sacrifice made by Dave Grohl for his fame. There was a whole
Jesus.
thing about this that people were, yes, there's a whole thing on Reddit. I can't find the link right now, but it just popped up on the top of my head as we were talking about Jay-Z and Beyonce, because when I first saw this, I was stunned. I was a huge Dave Grohl fan ever since, right? But after seeing this, I can't deny that there could be some truth to, I mean, if he confessed himself to being a Satanist, how are you going to deny that if that comes out of his own mouth?
Me
Right?
too. I used to be a big Dave Grohl fan too. And then I read about what he apparently did with his drummer, convincing him, pushing him to get the vaccine. He said he couldn't have any members in the band that didn't have the vaccine or whatever. Anyway, I don't know. Again, it makes you question everything. And you don't know. Look, the first mistake is putting someone on a pedestal who you really don't know who they are. You know, like thinking that they're this great person because you've seen them in a movie or you like their music and they seem like they're good people in interviews. You really just don't know who you're dealing with. I don't think you ever really do. So people are naive. We need to start to be much more critical about everything that we get told by authority figures.
Do you guys know Tila Tequila? Do you remember her?
Yes.
Brandon,
cool name, though.
Tila Tequila. She was huge in the 90s.
She's like a Z-list now, right?
She's a Christian now, but she used to be such a wild gal.
Ooh.
And she talks about, she pretty much outs the Hollywood elite. She talks about how crazy it is over there, the very apparent sex rings that are taking place there currently. And she talks about the Illuminati, and she talks about like the symbols, the stuff they do. Yeah, I have to find it. I think it was on either Instagram or TikTok. I have to go, but I'm sure you can find it if you DuckDuckGo it. Don't go on Google. And she talks about how the higher they are the higher the echelon they belong to, right? The hierarchy of Hollywood, the more depraved things they have to do to prove themselves, which, like you said, Clement, you know, it gives you a brand new lens through which to look at these stars. Look at Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson. Did they not move? And I think they acquired citizenship. Where is it? Belize or some other country? Is it Greece, Macedonia, something like that? I can't remember.
Yeah, somewhere where you're not able to be prosecuted as a child.
They can't be extradited. But they have some. Weren't they on Epstein's Island? Didn't they go? I believe.
I mean, I think there's so many. Tom Hanks, okay, Hollywood's most loved. He's
incredible. I love him. He's so good.
One of the greatest actors ever. Period.
It is just incredible. I grew up with his movies.
He's everyone.
He's everybody. But there's so many stories about him that I found. You know, there was a guy. My God, I can't remember the name of this guy, but I watched a video of him, and he was outing Hollywood for their child trafficking. And he died. He committed suicide, jumped off a bridge or something. A few days later, and there's something tying Hanks on Reddit and these kind of conspiracy theory websites to his death, because he was in the same place at the same time coincidentally, and made some references on his social media that kind of seemed like he was making fun of that dude. So I don't really know. It's an interesting thing. I'm really cautious not to jump to conclusions on the show and say this is how it is, But one of the tricks that I think I'm learning better and better is you take the information from all these different sources and you paint a picture. And if the picture seems to correlate, then there's something there. There's got to be something there, and it should be investigated.
I
Of
love
course,
Tom
we're
Hanks.
not
I
saying
sure
that they
hope
should.
not.
Yeah, me too, man. I honestly hope not too.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
know.
just
There are
so
such things as huge
crazy.
coincidences, but when the coincidences keep happening over and over again, you got to start questioning things. So hopefully,
Yeah,
Tom Hanks is still the lovable guy we all know, and not
he's
some psychopathic
definitely.
murderer.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
but
speaking of, all these things happening to children, the sex rings and all that, I mean, the war on women and children still raging. I mean, can we jump onto this real quick?
yeah, let's do it.
Mhm.
Is that, the whole transgender movement has really just, it's like wildfire, right? I mean, we're talking almost like it didn't just start overnight, but it's almost like the way that the world was swept up and consumed by it, and suddenly everyone's fighting for it. It just seems to be so radical and so swift. It's like a fire that raised an entire building made of hay. And suddenly it's now seen as a cool thing for kids to be trans. You have all these TikTok videos, Instagram videos where I don't know where this song is from, but it's like I guess a Disney song that goes, I want to be, you're going to be cool, you're going to be popular. Like that's the song playing. And then the video is actually of a parent. I think it was a dad with his kid. I don't even know if it's a boy or a girl, with a trans flag like draped over the child, and they're outing their kids. Is it really these kids that are going through gender dysphoria, or is it the parents wanting their children, because they have Munchausen by proxy, wanting these children to be trans because it's the cool thing? And they're telling kids that, hey, if you identify as a transgender, you'll be popular and you'll be cool. Now, if this didn't have such dire consequences, such as, mutilation of their body parts, getting on puberty blockers, taking hormones, maybe it could still be controlled, but this thing has taken a life of its own. And we have a lot of these detransitioners coming out talking about just the incredibly debilitating adverse effects of everything they've done. Even just being on puberty blockers alone has caused what? Sterility in both male
Mhm,
and females.
mhm.
Osteoporosis is bound to happen, especially to the girls who were given testosterone. It's just, and breast cancer on for the girls who have had their breasts cut off at such a young age. And they talk about gender being fluid, and yet they force them to make such permanent decisions on their bodies. So you see the hypocrisy immediately right then and there. And then this
Mm.
also branches out to, where do feminists who are fighting for transgenders, are they really fighting for women, or are they against, or do they hate women? Because we now no longer have safe spaces. A man was completely naked in a locker room at the YMCA, where young children change in these shower rooms, and he's there completely naked. Right. So
Mhm.
where do we draw the line on that? How women are being erased because of all these activists trying to fight for equality for transgenders. And that really is the question now. Like, where do we draw the line? When do we stop this? Is feminism for or against women? Because it's starting to show that feminists seem to hate women and want to erase women altogether. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of incidents of it that just it doesn't make sense. Like, look at athletics, for example. It's not fair to women. Most women in athletics don't want to compete against a man because it's not fair to them statistically. They're not going to win a majority of the time. And then there are men that are saying that they're trans and that they're a woman now, and then they go and compete against a bunch of women and win a trophy. And some of it is just wrong inherently. And it's weird that people are just turning a blind eye to it and acting like this is just normal and okay.
Well,
And
if you speak out about it, you're risking everything, especially if you're a
yeah,
prominent person who's got a lot of clout. I mean, you're not going to touch it, just like COVID, and
it's
it's
a,
by
yeah,
design, right?
it's a huge war on women in so many different avenues too. Um, and I don't know what to do about it. I don't know what people can do about it at this point. They've advertised it so much that they've normalized it to the point where you can't say anything. Like you do, like you're wrong. You're gonna get canceled. You're gonna get blocked. You're gonna get banned. I don't. It's amazing how far I think society has fallen, and I feel really bad for women because the majority of women out there don't want to see this kind of stuff. They don't want a man in their bathroom. It doesn't matter what you identify as. They don't want a man in their bathroom. They don't want a man in their sports. They won't want a man doing their jobs in the industry. They don't want a man in their social circles. Like women are women for a reason. They have the things that they like. They have the things that they like to do. And, there's a huge part of the world that revolves around just true biological women. So it's weird to inject men into that, even if they are quote unquote trans.
I think there's a huge attack on not just women, but the whole family unit as a whole. And the parallel to feminism is the emasculation of men. We've seen it
Mhm.
over. You look back, right? And I'll say one thing specifically that I don't know if many people think about, but I have a marketing agency and I've done a lot of work for clients. When you look for material that you want to use in the work that you're doing with them that represents people, there are no more media files or graphics that show men as really strong masculine men. It's all watered down feminist, kind of very feminine men. You've got emojis that we use every single day that they're asexual. I think what's happened is uh, this has kind of grown over time, and there's a lot of theories about why there would be an attack on the family unit. But I think one of the things that makes the most sense to me is if you can make men more feminine, if you can make women more masculine, you are unable to maintain some strong cohesion within relationships. You don't want to have children anymore necessarily. There's a lot less people having kids these days, and because of that, you're breaking down that whole traditional unit and everything that comes with it, like maybe community, maybe values and principles. And it becomes a lot easier to control people when they're unable to mobilize, when they're unable to have these strong foundations in place. I mean, um, you look at the places where libertarians go. They'll move out of, let's say, big cities, and they'll go to the middle of the forest or the countryside, places where they're not going to be shown this propaganda and have it pushed down their mouths all the time. Those are the kinds of people that recognize how important it is to have a close-knit community, to have faith, to be a man and be a woman, a real man. When I say that, what I mean is, women are biologically geared towards raising a family and taking care of kids and being social and connecting, and men are geared towards leaders. They're geared towards creating things and outdoing themselves and standing up against injustice, right, and tyranny. But we just don't seem to have that push anymore, because the values and the identities have all been destroyed. So I think from that perspective, personally, I think it's really smart whoever has worked on pushing these narratives, because they really do understand how humans work and how they can be controlled.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. The family is the basic unit of society. And when you can break that apart and, raise children in an environment where there is automatically a dysfunction of roles, like you said, men and women, these two genders, we all have our roles. There's a reason women carry the babies to term. There's a reason that men are the hunters. that you are the protectors because you were built for that. You have the biological framework to hunt and to kill and to carry and to build and to protect. Whereas we have the biological design to sense things intuitively that require that are required for the protection of our offspring, to take care of them, to know what they need. That's why fathers who are left with their babies when moms have a day off, there's so many comedy movies have been made out of this. Like, they don't know what to do. Daddy daycare, they're all clueless. And it pokes fun, but it's the truth. Like, we can laugh about these truths because we know them to be true. And what I find really insulting, I am a woman, therefore I am an expert on womanhood. And yet I have been reduced to a caricature where I now am being forced to bow down to a man parading as a woman, pretending he understands what it's like to have monthly cramps, to have contractions when they have no uterus. And I just feel so incredibly insulted and silenced by this, where it really has reduced women to a caricature. That's what we are. And you've got what's his name? Dylan, and this other guy, I forget his name, the creepy guy with the short hair that says biology is wrong. They have now become the face of feminine products. So
that guy, the influencer.
Yes, that influencer. And not to go off tangent, but if we talk religion, they talk about how women of the religion that wear the hijab, or like the whole covering, they say, oh, this religion erases women. And that used to be the one strong argument they had about, feminism. But out here in the open, you've got the drag queen culture, which is, they're brooming children, didn't say the dangerous word, also erasing women. They're making fun of us. They're making fun of us and erasing us and saying we don't have a right to speak up because they have more rights than we do, And so because of the lack of clarity in our roles, children have no idea who they are. And when your identity is not established at a young age or during your formative years, then you're easily swayed when you grow up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's kind of like it's almost like, I see it like Terminator, the whole, let's go for Sarah Connor instead of going for John, right? They're going to go as far back as they can, which is like the children, to destroy the family unit.
Yes.
It's funny, it's not funny, but you got to make fun of these things because it's fucking insane that they're attacking children and we're just sitting by watching them. Castration of kids is no small thing. Sexualization of kids is no small thing. These are sacred human beings. They need to be protected, and we are almost without power to do anything about it, because every time someone tries, it's cancellation time, right? It's like, oh, you're not following the script. You're not part of the game we're playing here. So we're going to get rid of you. Look at what happened to Andrew Tate. I don't agree with everything Andrew Tate says. He's a very controversial guy. I don't think he's someone I would aspire to be like, but I think he makes some really good points. And I think he speaks out about the establishment any chance he gets because he understands what they're doing and he's trying to help people to figure it out. And look what happened to him. There's no proof yet still. They're keeping him detained indefinitely. And God only knows what's going to happen to him. But I think what they're trying to do is slander him so much on these false allegations that by the time he gets released, he won't have as much power as he used to, because people will now think that he's just full of shit.
Maybe. There's a lot of ways it can play out. I really think when they go through the investigation, they find he didn't really do anything. And I don't really think he did. He'll get released and it won't be that long. But it'll be interesting to see play out. But what Andrew Tate is he's medicine right now in society, because you have a society that's pushing men to be more feminine, that's disrupting that family unit, and that's disrupting exactly what a man's role is supposed to be. And he's almost like the counter argument to it. And he's kind of emerged in that role. And he's very controversial in a lot of things he says, but he's talked about it on a lot of shows and podcasts, why he pushes those buttons, because he wants people to think, and he wants men in particular to be more manly, even to an extreme. He pushes them to be more of a man. You might not agree with all of it. I certainly don't either. But I think in a society where they're completely destroying what it means to be a man and to be masculine and putting a negative connotation on it. He's getting people to rethink what it means to be masculine. And I do think that's important to have. What's scary is that they remove him and make it so it's only one-sided and it's only a one direction type of argument.
Right. There's that. There are other guys like Chait, but I think he's perfected the marketing angle. And he, you know, people, that's one of the arguments that his opponents will make, is that, oh, he's just doing this for fame. He's just doing this for engagement. But how else are you supposed to get your point across, right?
They're going after people like Jordan Peterson now too. Did you see what happened to him? They're threatening to pull his license, and he hasn't done anything wrong.
Yeah. Anyone
But
who
see,
speaks out.
Yeah, no, you just see the double standard there. You know, you have Andrew Tate, who is very clearly masculine, and you have Jordan Peterson, who is very diplomatic, and he shows his emotions. He's a man who wears his heart on his sleeve. He gets made fun of for crying when he's trying to make a point that is truly emotional to him.
By much
And you know, I
lesser
watched
men.
that video. But exactly, by beta men, soy boys, as who likes to call them soy boys? I forget whose term that is. Was it Joe Rogan who coined that term,
That's
soy
cool.
boys?
Maybe.
But there's just, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And the point is, if you don't fit the narrative, then you've got to go, Joe.
Yeah. It's not going to be an easy fight, right? I mean, who knows what's going to happen to us when we reach 10 million subscribers, right? It's not an easy fight, but you've got to do it, because I think what separates people who actually say things from those that don't is the people who say things recognize that that's a responsibility. It really is a responsibility to talk against injustice and take action against injustice, whatever you can do, whatever you can manage. But you got to do it, otherwise you won't be able to sleep at night. Yeah, I mean, anyway, so I don't know if we've covered the whole war on women subject for today, but if there's anything, I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about.
I don't know, guys. I think we barely covered it. I think there's so much more we got to talk about.
There is a lot more.
That's okay. There's always another episode, but let's move on to the other stuff that are also very, very juicy.
Yeah, I mean, I could talk about the Davos situation. It's an interesting topic because everyone has their eyes, well, at least I think everyone, you know, who's waking up has their eyes on the 23rd World Economic Forum meeting, which is in Switzerland, because they talk about the future. They talk about how they're going to craft it. And just to clarify, the people who are present at these events are not nobodies. You know, it's a lot of money to be a part of the World Economic Forum. I think it's $500,000 or euros for your actual membership yearly, which is no small amount of money. And even then, I remember watching a podcaster who is a successful real estate mogul. He has, you know, maybe 20 million in the bank. British pounds, and they rejected him. You know, apparently you've got to have, you know, significant net worth, not just the membership fee, but something more too. So it's really difficult to get into WEF meetings, and the organizations, the people who are there are really high up. They're really elite. But you do get journalists attending as well. You get people invited who can cover the event and offer something. And this year, there was kind of like an outrage because, you know, they're always talking about climate. They're always going on about how everyone needs to be aware of their carbon footprint and need to be making better decisions, and we need to cut, you know, fossil fuels out by a certain year and have completely renewable energies in place. But they all flew in on private jets. You know, there's like 1,000 private jets that have landed in the area, and it apparently amounts to, you know, years of carbon, right, emissions. So the hypocrisy is huge, and even at this initial point of my argument or my coverage of this, it's like, how can you trust people who are so hypocritical? I'll give you another couple of hypocritical things that they've done. Right, they claim to be these saviors, these chosen emissaries for humanity, right? At least that's what that U.S. politician was saying on camera the other day. I forget his name. He was running for president. Does anyone remember what his name was? I showed you the video of that guy who was basically
Sorry, which
claiming
one?
that he was. I remember when I posted in Slack a video of a U.S. politician who was basically saying that we're, for whatever reason, we've been given this power to help shape
John
humanity.
Kerry.
John Kerry, that's the name. I didn't want to
Kerry.
finish it without mentioning his name. So we've got people like John Kerry who clearly have some kind of savior syndrome, narcissistic beyond belief. And they will say these things, and they will claim to be the epitome of human, the human race. But at the same time, you've got an unbelievable demand for prostitutes. High-profile escorts are being, pulled into Davos too, because there's just such a huge demand for it. That's another hypocritical thing, right? How can you trust people who are clearly morally corrupt on that level? And then the third thing is with the carbon emissions and the push for renewable energy and let's say vegan diets, non-meat, dairy, animal-based diets, right? The menu there is full of meat. They're all eating meat at this conference. So they've flown in on their private jets. They've expelled a whole ton of carbon to get there. They're sleeping with prostitutes. They're probably married, probably got kids, right? And then they've got a menu full of meat, the best food you can get, probably not sustainably farmed and all that kind of stuff, right?
But are they trans prostitutes?
Maybe. Who knows what the menu is for that?
What they're into.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Maybe the meat identify as a vegetable or something. They probably have some clever bullshit.
It's a transplant.
There you go.
I just think on that level, initial level, we haven't even got to like some of the juicy stuff yet, but just on a pure morality, like it's obvious that these people should not be, in charge of the way the world works. You need a proper strong person who is consistently speaking the truth and doing the things that are, doing good things. And those people generally don't last very long, or they get vilified. So that's the first point I wanted to make about this whole Davos thing. Now, they hired, or at least they got approved to have a deployment of 5,000 Swiss Army troops at the actual location. So I don't know really why they've got that figure of troops, but they're not using all the troops. There was this kind of whole thing about, well, they're not using all of them. It's not true. It's not 5,000 troops, but they can call on them if they want to. So in my books, that is 5,000 troops. Why do they need them? What's the whole problem? I know that these people want security, but that's an incredible amount of power. And people do attribute it to the fact that a lot of us are waking up now because of what's been going on with COVID and the lockdowns and these aggressive measures and the elimination of Dutch farming and all of those things that seem to be waking people up quickly. That's why they need so much security. And my question is, before you guys jump in on that, why do you need so much security if you're doing things that are in the best interests of everybody? If you've genuinely done something that's for the betterment of everybody, why would you need to protect yourself so much? And I mean, there's a lot of arguments to be made. I don't know what you think about all of that.
I think at first glance, having all that security, in somewhat of a way makes sense, because you have all these people there that are incredibly wealthy, incredibly powerful. They're at supposedly a very important event and conference and talking about the state of the world and the future of the world economy going forward and what they're going to do, whether it's good, bad, positive or nefarious. But having that security there, in Switzerland to enforce the neutrality and make sure nothing bad happens, might be justified. That's just a counter argument. At the same time, I don't think the Swiss Guard is, very good at what they do. Switzerland's not good and known for being a warfaring country. So 5,000 troops, I think is very equivalent to what is needed for security. I'm taking shots at Switzerland right now.
That's good.
Shots fired.
I don't know.
Cooking chocolate over a fire.
it's such an interesting event. I followed it primarily from a finance perspective. And there are very interesting people that are there, and it is very hard to get into. One of them being the CEO for Ripple Labs, which is in a major lawsuit with the SEC, has been going on for almost a couple of years now, that they're probably going to wrap up sometime in the first or second quarter of this year. And the CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, is there talking about the future of the financial system, despite them, being in a major lawsuit with the SEC and potentially, being shut down, but they might get out of it. They're a huge leading factor for future remittances, which is changing in March. The whole banking system is going to shift to a completely new standard, and most people don't even know about that. SWIFT is going out the door. They're going to implement completely new technology. So there's a lot of things that's going on there, a lot of conversations, a lot of under the table stuff. So I imagine they want the privacy. I imagine they want the ability to orchestrate certain things. And I think this is the kind of place where things are orchestrated, where you get some of the most influential and powerful people in the world at the same table. So there's a lot of secrets, probably. There's a lot of dark stuff. There's probably a lot that, we're never going to know for sure. But it's just the way it goes with this kind of things.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything you can really do. The kind of the conclusion that I came to after really thinking about all of this is how the world works. You have power and you have influence. You put people together, they just naturally come together at any level in the hierarchy of our social life. We seek people who can either pull us up or at least connect with us on our level. So that's no different, I think, for people at that. And I think people who are in that situation are even more geared towards it because they absolutely 100% recognize the power of networking, which is where all these secret clubs come in, which we talked about earlier. So the conclusion that I've made is that I really, unfortunately, there's nothing really much you can do about private conversations going on that will have an impact on a whole bunch of people across the world. But the reality is that I do believe that there's a lot of, I would say, there's a lot of kind of, like you said, it's not in the best interests of I think everybody. I think it really does kind of fall into the whole collusion pot in many ways. And how couldn't it, right? We know what some of these companies have been involved with, and we know what some of the legal battles these companies have been through, Pfizer specifically. And I know we're going to talk about the vaccine related stuff later, but we have a video that we can show of a interview.
Albert Bourla.
It's not really an interview, but I'm going to be nice and say it's an interview with Albert Bourla while he's walking from the outskirts of the location to where the actual enclosure begins. And that's completely open for people to approach these members and start talking to them. So let's take a look at this real quick.
Mr. Bourla, can I ask you, when did you know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission? How long did you know that without saying it publicly?
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry. Answer that question. I mean, we now know that the vaccines didn't stop transmission, but why did you keep it secret? You said it was 100% effective, then 90%, then 80%, then 70%. But we now know that the vaccines do not stop transmission. Why did you keep that secret?
Have a nice day.
I won't have a nice day until I know the answer. Why did you keep it a secret that your vaccine did not stop transmission?
Is it time to apologise to the world, sir? To give refunds back to the countries that poured all their money into your vaccine that doesn't work, your ineffective vaccine?
Yeah, you have a little bit around.
Are you not ashamed of what you've done in the last couple of years?
Do you have any apologies to the public, sir?
Are you proud of it? You've made millions on the backs of people's entire livelihoods. How does that feel to walk the streets as a millionaire on the backs of the regular person at home in Australia, in England, in Canada?
What do you think about on your yacht, sir? What do you think about on your private jet? Are you worried about product liability? Are you worried about myocarditis?
What about the sudden deaths?
What do you have to say about young men dropping dead of heart attacks every day? Why won't you answer these basic questions? No apologies, sir.
Do you think you should be charged criminally for some of the criminal behavior you've obviously been a part of?
How much money have you personally made off the vaccine?
How many boosters do you think it'll take for you to be happy enough with your earnings? Nothing?
Who did you meet with here in secret? Will you disclose who you met with? Who did you pay commissions to? In the past, Pfizer has paid $2.3 billion in fines for deceptive marketing. Have you engaged in that same conduct again? Are you under investigation like you were before for your deceptive marketing, sir?
If any other product in the world doesn't work as promised, you get a refund. Should you not refund to countries that laid out billions for your ineffective vaccine?
Are you used to only sympathetic media, so you don't know how to answer any questions?
Is that it? Shame on you, sir.
Shame on you. That's Albert Bourla, the boss of Pfizer. His people were pushing us around a little bit.
Mate,
There's more to it. I mean, it's a long video, but I think it's an important one to watch because the response from this guy who had the most contracts for the mRNA vaccines and the most consumed vaccine, let's say, around the world, which is apparently ineffective according to their own documentation. I'm not saying anything here that's just opinion. This is really part of their own documentation, say that it's kind of not effective at stopping transmission, and many claim is negatively effective, meaning you're actually more likely to get COVID. It's been shown the more you get, the more doses you get of this vaccine. His response was nothing. He didn't say anything at all. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who have such great power and are influencing what we put into our own bodies with the collusion of the state. And when they are approached, there is no justice because they know they're immune from it. They have impunity. And it boils my blood, Like, I mean, there's, again, like I said, there's not much we can do apart from talk about it, cover it, share it. But there needs to be some kind of justice here. It's an insane situation to be in. It's like watching a James Bond villain or villains kind of have their, secret meals and dinners and stuff. And you're just like, you can't do anything about it.
It makes me mad too. The only people that have actual immunity in the situation, in any sense of the word immunity, are these big pharma companies, because the government has given them the ability to crank out a vaccine in a very short period of time. And it's very dangerous to do so. Again, I think we've talked about this before on the show, but these vaccines take years, like half a decade, sometimes an entire decade to even get approved by the FDA. And that goes with every other drug out there too. And there's a reason for that, is because if you crank something out that you inject into someone's body, a foreign substance, whether it be a viral agent or a pathogen or whatever it may be, or a new technique like mRNA, and you don't research it fully, you don't test it fully, and you just launch it into the public, there are going to be ramifications and people are going to die. And that's what's happened. And it's sick, and it makes me mad that they act like that it's totally fine and it's okay and they don't care. And what's going to happen in 10, 20, 30 years is you're going to see people get incredibly sick with new illnesses, with new disabilities. Their children are going to have problems. There are going to be fertility issues. And it's not the first time this stuff has happened, and it's just been washed under the rug. Everything from Teflon to RF radiation to aspartame, the list goes on and on. How long do we have to do this before people realize there's another repeat cycle here? And they're like, oh, I guess the mRNA vaccine is bad. And then on top of that,
sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, but on top of that, the guy that pretty much invented the mRNA vaccine came out
Robert Malone.
and said, the virologist, Dr. Robert Malone, said that the mRNA vaccine that he developed has problems and it's going to make people sick. And then they canceled him. They just got rid of him. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, him and Dr. Peter McCullough. And, in stark contrast to Albert Bourla, right, CEO of Pfizer, you've got the Moderna CEO admitting live on air at Davos that they were making the COVID-19 vaccine in January of 2020, even before SARS-CoV-2 had a name. And don't forget all those tweets from Bill Gates, right, where he said that the next best investment is in vaccines. Do you remember that? He had a tweet on that. And this was
like
in
they know something we
2019.
don't. Huh?
Yes. So he tweeted that in 2019. I have to go and dig up that actual graphic, but somebody had put that on, and they linked to that tweet where he said that the next big investment is in vaccines. And that was right before the whole big blow up of COVID-19. So you know what they say, you got to create the sickness and then sell the antidote. So they never let a crisis go to waste, is what they say, right?
That's another point here on the whole topic of Davos that I want to outline, which is whatever they are warning us about, we really, as a possibility, right? Because how could they know, right? They're clearly just basing their assumptions on possibilities, right? There's no way they could know. So, but everything they seem to have projected is coming true. So what they're saying this time is that a major catastrophe or two are likely to happen within the next few years. One of them is a cyber attack that could take down the global system. Everything from power grids to the internet to, well, you know what I'm talking about. Everything, right? You'd be in the dark ages, essentially. That's what they're warning against. So I'm taking that very seriously because they have a good track record of predicting these things. Let's take a look at what some of the representatives or people involved at Davos said about that.
Cyber experts and business leaders right to fear an imminent, damaging cyber attack.
Absolutely. And in fact, the geopolitical instability that we're witnessing is increasing the challenges and actually the pace at which this risk is growing. If I could just sketch that out for the...
It's all about, like, I think, laying the foundations for fear. Fear is a big thing at Davos. It's all about kind of avoiding suffering and avoiding the destruction of the human species. And everything is so emphasized in its severity, when at the same time you have independent scientists and journalists and investigators saying the opposite. It's not so serious that we're in an existential threat right now, that we need to stop producing all our fossil fuels and move over to whatever the other energy is going to be, because there's a whole bunch we could talk about that would contradict renewable energy as a clean energy for at least the next couple of decades, because of all the production we would have to do, which obviously needs fossil fuels to do. So they're dirty as well from a certain perspective. But everything I feel that I'm watching at Davos is about priming fear in people so that they can go ahead and implement those solutions that they're discussing. Another major event that could happen is, again, the global climate crisis. And there was a little clip of this that I wanted to show you, and I'm going to talk about these two in a second.
Dear friends, scientifically, this is not a climate crisis. We are now facing something deeper: mass extinction, air pollution, undermining ecosystem functions, really putting humanity's future at risk. This is a planetary crisis.
This is a safety crisis, but above all, it is also a justice crisis. Many areas in the world are uninhabitable. This uninhabitable zone is increasing. If we continue with our greenhouse gas emissions, then by 2070, as many as 3 billion people will live in uninhabitable zones.
So someone jokes, how many times can you mention crisis in the same video? Language is a powerful thing, right? It's a crisis. It's not just a climate emergency. It's an existential threat to humanity. And it's not just about the climate. It's about justice. All of these kinds of things, this language is geared to manipulate people into really just coming on board with all of it as soon as possible in the shortest amount of time possible. And it's all scripted too, right? You saw in the first clip, they're reading from their scripts. All of them have papers in front of them. They're referencing them. The reporter is obviously on the payroll. There's no journalist that gets to sit down and ask these people questions that hasn't already been vetted and is part of the whole network of journalists that are owned by these people. So it's a really crazy PR. I think it's just a very high profile PR event for a lot of the stuff that they want to do. And then what we don't see are those private meetings that you talked about, Brandon, that happen behind the scenes. And then it's over. It's back to business again. Implement the plan. Yeah.
I like how they talk about the zones of the world that will be uninhabitable, and then they light up the map and it lights up Colombia. And I'm like, I'm living here. There's nothing environmentally wrong with Colombia. It's one of the most biodiverse countries in the world. It's clean. It's healthy. And the climate is consistent.
Blink
I'm
twice
fine.
if you need help.
Clement, you're good, right?
Fires anywhere right now. I feel pretty comfortable. I'm not sweating to death.
No, you guys are living the dream.
It's like they just lit up random places on the map in the third, second world emerging economies, and are like, oh well, no one's going to talk about those because no one goes there. And I feel like they don't do their due diligence. Someone writes them a script, they read the script, they pitch it, they induce fear, they scare people, and then they say, okay, but it can be solved if you do this and you take this vaccine and you become a trans woman and you follow the guidelines, be a perfect citizen. From our perspective,
I saw Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, is actually at the event. And I watched one of his clips. He's basically going back to his socialist Marxist roots. And he's basically saying capitalism hasn't worked for the last 30 to 40 years. And is that something we really want more of right now? I mean, I got a lot of arguments that I could give him, right? I could basically build my case that the capitalism we've seen hasn't exactly been, right, a free market capitalism. And maybe the WEF events are one of the reasons why that's the case. Collusion with government, fascism, all that kind of stuff.
He would know. He's a former M19 member.
Exactly. He's probably kidnapped and done a whole lot of other stuff.
He was one of those guys that would kidnap people, abduct people, and torture them. Like, he was a bad dude. He went to jail.
Yeah. And so I was thinking, okay, look, all of this crazy stuff that I've been learning about how the CIA works and how governments are overthrown, and watching Brazil go up in flames recently when the whole country decided to stand up against the biggest criminal in the history of Brazil, by the way. It's not just some small thing. He was in jail and he was put in power somehow. Apparently he was voted in, but the people of Brazil don't seem to think so. I was starting to think maybe Gustavo Petro, maybe those weird voting situation that happened on the election day had something to do with the CIA there as well. I mean, there's a lot of people who are getting put in power that have these very strong left ideologies, and I don't think that's really doing anything other than helping this global elite get what they want.
There's just so much hypocrisy. They talk about the greenhouse emissions. They talk about sustainability and what did she call it? Justice crisis. How is this a justice crisis?
Crisis of justice.
Right? When you have,
I don't know. I have no idea.
Let's talk about electric vehicles, because they're talking about let's go green, right? So they want everyone to start using electric stoves. They want everyone to be using electric vehicles. What kind of batteries do you need for these electric vehicles? And what is the mineral needed for these batteries, by the way?
Lithium.
You know, let's look at the Democratic Republic of Congo, where they barely have livable working environments, right? I mean, the cobalt miners there are facing death every single day. They're inhaling dust. They don't even have water. They don't have enough food. They are not well rested. And what does it do to the actual planet when you have to replace your batteries, because the batteries can't be recycled? They're just dumped into landfills, and it actually they cause more emissions building these parts, transporting these parts, and then transporting these vehicles than it does for you to just keep your car, the car that you're using right now. So there's just so much hypocrisy everywhere, and really what it is it's all about the money and control, like what you said. It boils down to those two.
I don't think it's got anything to do with really taking care of the planet, unfortunately. And I mean, one of the other criticisms that I will give to this whole event is that there is no discussion about innovation, really. Innovation in the sense that how can we improve our consumption of fuel? How can we make it less polluting, but still maintain the health of the economy and the people that are, operating the farms and the systems and the food? How do we incentivize creativity and innovation so that we can actually maintain our quality of life? Nothing about that. The whole thing is about getting rid of it all as fast as possible, without anyone having a chance to really look at it under a microscope. And they're pushing so fast and so hard right now because I think they realize that this window is the only opportunity that they're going to get on this cycle of this planning to be able to get us onto these digital electric grids frameworks, whether it's finance. Brandon talks about that in his book, whether it's about the electric cars that people just don't want to use, whether it's about the renewable energy and the batteries that can't be replaced easily or recycled easily, rather. It's all going so fast that I don't know if they're going to achieve it or not. I'm hopeful that we wake up faster than they're able to implement these policies, and we can do something about it.
We're on the fourth turn. This is it.
Yep. Or the Fourth Reich, as I'm reading a book called The Fourth Reich right now. It's scary stuff. I'm not even going to get into that. I don't even know if this is the right episode to do it.
We're getting to a very interesting point in time. There's a great book called The Singularity by Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you know who he is or not, but I highly recommend it. And he, for a long time, has talked about a point in human society where technology will become smart enough, capable enough to fully revolutionize how society works, as well as help take over and manage and make society more efficient. And that year is around 2040. So we're getting very, very close. And when you look at the technologies that we have today, it's kind of crazy what exists, and it's not unfathomable that we're going to be able to solve a lot of these problems pretty soon. A lot of it is just politically based. I'm not necessarily worried about a lot of it. I think it's just fear mongering. I think it's control. I think it's just a matter of trying to find a way to keep the sheep in line, sort of say.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad that you have a positive outlook on it. What about the vaccine related? Well, let's not call them vaccine related. Let's say, since we don't know what's going on with the excess deaths these days, which are just going through the roof.
Yeah, it's crazy. We talked about it a little bit not too long ago in the episode as well, but there are a lot of people that are dying as a result of the vaccines. While COVID deaths have started to come down, and while COVID was terrible, the vaccines seem like a much more bigger issue at this point, and the fact that they're creating these mandates and making people take them. And in very specific industries and different levels of society, it's affecting people. Even in sports, for example, there's like 1,200 people, professional athletes in the U.S. that died just last year from cardiac related illnesses. I had to look this up this morning, but there's in the Chinese Medical Association journal, even in China, they're reporting that COVID deaths are down, but there's an increase in mortality rates that are directly correlated to vaccines.
You mean they align with the rollout of the vaccines?
Yeah. Medical conditions resulting from it, potential issues with fertility in both men and women, heart-related issues, lung-related issues, potential cancer-related issues. Some of these things are going to take years to pan out potentially. But the numbers and the deaths are starting to rack up to the point where it's concerning. And these are people that are young and healthy too, especially athletes, which is the craziest thing. These are some of the most fit people in the world, some of the most conditioned people in the world with the strongest lungs and the strongest hearts and the best muscle density and the strongest bone density that are starting to drop dead for things that they shouldn't be. That's very concerning to me. That's not an average person. That shouldn't even be a talking point. And then, we talked about Robert Malone a little bit. We talked about issues with vaccines like the mRNA vaccine, the fact that they're not allowing people to speak on it, especially the guy that created it, which is very concerning. It's like Elon Musk saying that, oh, we can't use the Falcon 9 rockets anymore because they'll explode and kill all the passengers. And then the government saying, fuck you, we're going to use them anyways. It's wrong. It makes no sense to me. Like, if the person that invented it says there's something wrong, why would we, exactly.
There was one doctor that was able to get through on BBC. Do you want to play that video right now? I've got it here.
Yeah.
He got through.
And this is something that is probably a likely contributing factor, is that the COVID mRNA vaccines do carry a cardiovascular risk. And I've actually called for the suspension of this pending an inquiry, because there's a lot of uncertainty at the moment about what's causing the excess deaths. Some of it will be ambulance delays. My own father, it was reported on BBC News in late 2021. I was the first to actually highlight the ambulance delays because my own father suffered a cardiac arrest at home and the ambulance took 30 minutes. And when his post-mortem came out, he had very severe coronary artery disease, which is unexplainable. I then published in a peer-reviewed journal. They accepted my findings that the likely cause of his death was 2 doses of the Pfizer mRNA vaccine he had 6 months earlier. So
can I just,
think there's lots of, sorry.
I'm sorry, I just want to jump in on that point. So what you're saying in terms of the mRNA link to cardiovascular risk is that is it's been proven medically, has it? Scientifically?
Yeah, for the question. So in medicine, in any research that we do, it's very difficult to always be absolutely conclusive. So we go on likelihoods. And there are lots of data now. The highest quality data is what we call randomized controlled trial evidence. So there was a reanalysis in the journal Vaccine published recently, where they found that the original trials of Pfizer and Moderna with mRNA vaccines showed, and I just want to put this in absolute terms because we don't want to scare people unnecessarily, but the absolute risk of serious adverse events was at least 1 in 800.
Okay.
And a lot of those are cardiovascular. And then you were more likely in those trials to suffer a serious adverse event than to be hospitalized with COVID early on. And I think the vaccine has certainly helped people who are high risk, but now we should be reassured that Omicron and what's circulating is really no worse than the flu. And this is really time to pause the vaccine rollout and to really investigate this properly.
Okay, so I just want to clarify one point here.
She's kind of like fumbling around with her papers at the end there, not really knowing what to do. People don't understand. They're listening to what their boss is saying. I don't know what the name, their producer. Right? Yeah, you would know, right? So
we have an earpiece and they're yelling at us saying, deflect, go, go give other statistics, but you got to look calm while they're screaming at you to avoid what was just said. That's that's part of
Yes, he was losing his mind. The person on the earpiece was losing their mind, which kind of explains how she interjected at the certain vaccine related points. But crazy stuff. I don't know what else has been going on.
Wild on the internet, no matter where you go, social media, YouTube, Spotify. If you mention the word COVID, just mention it in any kind of context, even if it's not even related to COVID for some reason, they have to slap on a disclaimer.
Yeah.
Why is that even so if it's necessary? What, of all things out there?
Paranoid.
You know what it's doing though? It's having the opposite effect. The more they do it, the more people are starting to think the opposite. That's at least what I'm seeing. People are joking about it. They're making memes about it. They're reflecting on it. And the more you see that thing pop up, because you shouldn't have to say something that's obviously true, right? You shouldn't have to remind someone about something that they genuinely believe is true. People are seeing it for what it really is, which is why I said there's a real window of opportunity here that if they don't take this, they're not going to be able to do a lot of the stuff that they want to do with regards to our freedoms.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, these are some interesting numbers. Between 1966 to 2004, there have been 1,100 deaths due to cardiac arrests, right? But so look at that number, 1,100 from 1966 to
due to vaccines.
2004. Sudden deaths in athletes specifically, right?
Okay.
So take that as you will. And then you look at 2020 to 2021, there have been a little under 1,600 deaths in athletes.
Yeah.
That's just such a ridiculously stark contrast. And people say, well, we got to start asking questions. We've been asking questions since they came out with this vaccine, right? I mean, we are the trials, aren't we? If they never really had these randomized controlled trials, we've got to be it, because then why are they pushing so hard for everyone in the world to get it? Not to mention asking for 85 years before they release the side effects. It's because by that point, everyone's unalive. There's no one to
something
compare
like
it to.
85. It's a long time.
It's funny.
basically,
It's the same political group that pushes that one death is too many deaths. One person is too many. And then, they turn cold shoulder to 1,600
Right.
people dying in a year. And you're just like, what the fuck?
Healthy people, 1,600 healthy people.
Not
and
just
they say,
healthy, like top tiered athletes.
Yeah, exactly.
Like people that
they
are
say
beyond
stuff like,
healthy.
soccer is such a dangerous sport. Like, what? And then maybe American football, but soccer? I don't know. But then you have these soccer players that just are like standing on the field and they just kind of collapse face down. Oh, for what?
Well, it's not just on the
reason.
field; it's on national television, right? International
reporters,
TV,
journalists too.
Hosts,
That comedian.
just dropping over, keeling over. Comedians. That comedian recently. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that was bad timing. That was really bad timing. She made a joke about COVID. She made a joke about Jesus, and then she just fainted immediately after. Yeah.
And it's terrible,
Don't
but
laugh,
it's
you're
also
going to hell, Brandon.
that's why I'm laughing. I'm like, I gotta be going to hell.
I'm just kidding.
It is really troubling. I don't know. Well, the thing that I kind of have faith in is that the doctors that are speaking out about it are growing in numbers. And if there's anyone to trust, it's people who are experts in their field. So the more that this goes unanswered, I think the more enraged that community will get. And so eventually, hopefully, we're going to get some kind of answer. They already have mRNA vaccines for other things now. They've got it for the heart conditions that have been caused, or maybe not caused by the vaccines, but we seem to think they have been. And so
the cardiac arrests.
So they've got like counter mRNA for mRNA. What else are they doing? Cancer mRNA treatments too. mRNA could be the reason for this. And so how are we going to jump to the conclusion that we should be putting more of it into our body? I don't understand. I don't understand that. But it's a business model for sure.
It's funny how
it's all a business model. That's why they defend this so much. Look at concussions in the NFL. For years, they covered up concussions and head trauma and the effects that can have on an athlete, and not just in football, but across all other sports as well. And it was all for the sake of profit, because they're scared that it would hurt the league, that it would hurt players wanting to become a professional athlete. They would hurt the entertainment business that they're built upon. It's all about money. It's just really sad that they don't put the health first, and they say they do. And they're like, we have all these new concussion protocols now, but what about everything else? And then when something new crops up, they just deny it. And it's a cycle in society, even outside of sports. It's, again, mentioned this earlier, but everything from Teflon to the food and MSG and aspartame to RF radiation from your electronic devices, you name it. Like, all these things have been proven and were denied originally. It's just another case, another scenario. It's just sad.
they're blaming everything. And I mean, this is the last point I'll make on it, but they're blaming everything that is resulting in a heart-related condition on anything but the vaccine. And a lot of it is climate related, which makes sense because they want more fuel for their climate war. And so if the heart attacks can be blamed on, let's say, rising temperatures or whatever else they're saying it could be. Video games was another one, violent video games. Apparently, if you haven't taken, this is not the same thing, but it's in the same area. If you haven't taken the vaccine, you're more likely to have a car crash. What? Who came up with that statistic, and how did that get into a major mainstream paper? It's like they're just clutching at anything right now, which sucks.
They're saying also that the mainstream media and the alarming headlines are causing cardiac arrests in people. It's like,
oh yeah, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you're gonna cause some heart attack somewhere. Oh my
ridiculous.
God.
Brandon, I just want to go back to what Brandon said about the NFL and football. There was that movie. Remember, Will Smith was in that movie. He played Dr. Bennett Omalu. And it was based on a true story on how it was an accident, actually, how he discovered it. But it was very interesting. I did watch that film. I watched it in the theater twice, and then I watched it again when it, came out on streaming. And there's a lot of merit to his research. They were able to sort of really dissect that and prove it. And he was able to publish his study. But like you said, it's all about the profit, and it's all about redirection and fear mongering. And now we can't even read the news or watch the news because we might get heart attacks. Right. So it's what can we do? What can we do? Everything is deadly. Everything's going to kill us.
Look around, research for the show. And the only place I can ever get a decent division of opinions, or let's not say division, we'll say a variety of opinions, is Twitter. It's the only place I can get a really good variety of opinions on these topics because because they've taken all of the bullshit formulas and algorithms and shadow bans and things out. So Twitter is the place to be if you're trying to figure out what's going on. But I think that kind of sums it up, right? I mean, we've covered all of our bases with these topics as much as we could. It's a crazy world out there, folks. You just got to stay thinking critically, keep your mind open. Don't believe everything you watch, hear. Get a second opinion, a third opinion, right? Even I try to do that. Some of the things that I thought were real about, some of these subjects. I mean, I'll keep my mind open. There are some benefits to obviously some of the things they're talking about in Davos. Cutting down emissions is a good thing. It's just, how do you do it? So I'm not convinced yet, but if you like this show, if you like the episode, subscribe, like the video, share it, comment, tell us what you think. And we really appreciate you being here and following us. And we'll see you on the next one. Take care.
See you guys.
Bye.